more trusted in-home care provider, helping you keep your aging loved ones in their home as they grow older. Before we jump into today's chat, I do want to go over a few reminders. All of your lines have been muted, so feel free to do the dishes, check your emails, do all that other stuff that I know you're busy taking care of. We won't be able to hear you. It's okay. When you have a question, and I know there will be a bunch coming up, go ahead and enter them into the question section on your screen. If you're joining us just via telephone, but you want to email in your question, we take your questions anytime at livechat@homeinstead.com, and I'll be checking that throughout the chat as well. And as a reminder, we are going to send you a link to this recorded chat so that you can refer to it in the future or share it with a friend. And that way you'll also have the different resources that we have mentioned throughout the event. Okay, well, let's get started with today's chat. My name is Kat Kaler. I'm the social media advocate here at Home Instead Senior Care. And what that means is I get to interact with all of you professional caregivers and family caregivers online, like our Facebook page, which is Remember for Alzheimer's, and on Twitter, and of course in our live chats here. I also have the great pleasure of working with great people like our guest today, Karen Garner. Karen is an Alzheimer's activist. She's also a contributor on helpforalzheimersfamilies.com. You can ask her questions there, and you can also get insight to her everyday life as a caregiver. You can also find Karen on her blog, missingjim.com, which is a great telling of her story through this journey. Karen is also the founder of the Garner Foundation, and we'll talk more about that later in the chat. And most notably, she is the wife of Jim and the mother of their 2 children. So she is a very busy lady. So Karen, thank you so much for taking time to join our chat today.
Oh, thank you, Kat, and thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this. I'm very excited to be here today.
Absolutely. Before we jump into some questions, the topic of today's chat is really after the diagnosis. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about some of maybe those first things that maybe you need to do that you don't think about once you get that diagnosis. Or perhaps, Karen, what are some of the things that maybe you wish you would have known about ahead of time, even before a diagnosis, that we can share with our friends and our families?
Oh my gosh, so important. Well, to start off with, I think it's so important to be honest about the diagnosis. And sometimes I think many people have a really hard time with that. They sort of live in denial and start putting things off, even though maybe they know they should be doing some things and they don't, or maybe they should be having some discussions they should, and they don't, and they think they have plenty of time, and the next thing you know, they don't. And I just think one of the first and foremost things is probably the hardest, and that is just accepting the diagnosis itself, because that alone is heartbreaking and very, very difficult to do. So I think that's the first step, because until you really do that, you're probably going to have a hard time doing anything else that I recommend or anybody else recommends to you. So that would be one of the first things. And then the next thing is to find a good support group, whether it's friends or through the Alzheimer's Association. You know, start talking and getting information for your local area. Elder care attorneys specialize in helping usually elderly people, but also people with dementia. It took us 3 tries to find the right attorney, because even though we went to elder care attorneys, not all of them really had dealt with a situation like ours, having somebody with younger onset Alzheimer's with children at home. And my husband, Jim, is retired military, so there were some issues with that as well. So it took us a while. Sometimes you have to set up an appointment and have an interview with them, and hopefully they'll be as honest with you as our attorneys were with us and say, we are not the attorney for you and can't help you, but here's the name of somebody else that possibly can. So it might take you a couple of tries. Very important for a couple of reasons. The first is you need to get your financials in order, because eventually one day you're probably going to need some care help, whether it's at home or in a facility somewhere, and hopefully you'll be able to pay for it, but if you can't, then you're going to have to rely on some assistance, and they have a 5-year look back, and so you need to go ahead and get all of your financials in order while you can immediately. So I strongly recommend that. And among other things, you can get their help applying for disability. Disability paperwork is just very cumbersome and overwhelming, especially if you've just recently gotten a diagnosis like this. Just the mental aptitude to fill out that paperwork could be very difficult. So I highly recommend having them assist you with that if at all possible. And of course, updating your wills and having the important conversations, with end-of-life care, as far as do you want to live at home? Do you want to be put into a home? Do you want a feeding tube? Do you not want a feeding tube? The sooner you have those types of conversations, the easier it will be on the caregiver long term, because when it's time to make those decisions, you don't want to second guess yourself. So elder care attorney, definitely. And to be honest with you, I got this advice actually from a friend of mine who's actually a couple of years younger than me, who lost her husband very tragically, and she had young kids at home. And I asked her, I said, what's the one thing you wish that you had done? And she said, get more life insurance. So, for somebody in a situation similar to ours, where there's young children at home and planning financially long term, you probably really need to do that before you get the diagnosis. So if you have an inkling it's coming, that might be something to look into to protect yourself later on down the road.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, go ahead. Did you have something?
No, I was going to say that's great information. A couple of things that you brought up, is talking about it, and regardless of whether it's Alzheimer's or whatever it is. I think we have this fear of planning for those scary moments.
Yes.
So if we can, talking about getting life insurance, and life insurance is really affordable when you're in your 30s and healthy. So, having those conversations early with your family and with your loved ones. And Karen, we were talking last week, and we had said something about, if we could have the talk about, what will we do, what do we want to do, versus what do we do now talk.
Exactly.
It's a whole different ball game.
Yes, and I believe I had recommended the book I had been reading to you, Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. And he talks in that book about these types of discussions. What is okay for you? What can you live with? Can you live with being in a wheelchair? Can you live with, being on a respirator or being in oxygen? I think I used the example in the book. There was somebody who just, as long as they could eat ice cream and watch the game on TV, they were fine. Once they couldn't do that, they didn't want any extreme measures to keep them alive. So it's all in what the patient is comfortable with, and keeping them happy and comfortable, and at the same time making it easier on the caregiver so they aren't put under undue stress with having to try to second guess what the person they're responsible for would want. So I think
and Karen, I'm going to make sure that in the email that we send out, that we include a link to a resource for this very topic. We have what we call the 40-70 rule. And so basically when we created this, what we envisioned was by the time you're 40 or your parents are about 70, you should definitely be having these conversations.
Definitely.
And quite honestly, the earlier you can do it, the better. But that's a great resource. It has different tools and how to have those conversations, whether it's with your parent or another loved one. There's some different activities in there so that whether it's with a loved one or for yourself, you can start making those plans and making those wishes known. So if you're interested in that now, and you don't want to wait for that email, it's on caregiverstress.com, but I'll make sure we get a link to all of you listening in our follow-up email. Karen, I do want to point out a couple of the other things that you mentioned that are really important that I want our listeners to take note of is not just talking about it from a planning standpoint, but because it's okay. It's part of your life. Erasing that stigma that there's something wrong,
so important,
or shameful. Because when we start accepting that it's shameful or we have to hide, not only does our loved one with Alzheimer's become isolated, but so does the family and the caregivers.
I agree 100%, and that's one of the things Jim and I talked about early on, because actually when we first realized something was wrong and he was getting diagnosed, that in itself was just a long, cumbersome problem, trying just to get the diagnosis. He had top security clearance for his job with the government, and so we really couldn't talk about it. But once he lost his job, and that didn't matter, we sat down and had a heart-to-heart discussion, and he 100% backed the idea of going public and trying to erase that stigma, not only for our family and our children, but for other people out there, because it runs in his family. They had gone through this already with his mom, and we didn't know it at the time, but we would go through it with his brother, that, it's really important for people to understand they haven't done anything wrong. I mean, I've been asked by somebody in college, an educated person, if it's contagious, if Alzheimer's is contagious. And, I just don't think the general public who hasn't had to deal with it is very well educated about this disease.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned, the financial component, can, in many situations, become cumbersome. So the importance of having an early diagnosis so that you can actively make those plans, make arrangements to protect your loved one and yourself is really important. So you're right, finding an elder care attorney that's a right fit for your situation is important. And it's okay to go in and talk to somebody and not use their services and say, I'm sorry, I don't think this is the right fit. This is a really big component in your life, and don't feel guilty because you've taken 30, 60 minutes of somebody's time. Don't feel like that means you've got to sign the dotted line and use their services if they're not a good fit. So thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah, that's true. And trust me, you will not be the only person who's ever come in, spent 30 minutes with them, and walked out not using their services. You will be one of many, so don't feel bad about it. That's what they're there for.
Very good. Okay, we're going to jump into some questions, Karen. And for those of you who are just joining us, I'm Kat Kaler with Home Instead Senior Care, and I'm chatting today with Karen Garner. She is the founder of the Garner Foundation, as well as the words behind missingjim.com, and you can also find her as a contributor on helpforalzheimersfamilies.com. Karen, our first question came in via email. And again, for those of you who have questions, whether it's tomorrow or any time, feel free to send those to us at livechat@homeinstead.com. I read all of them, and I try to respond to as many as I can. So Karen, this one comes from Sherry, and here's her question. She says, I've been a primary caregiver to my mother for 5 years during her struggle with Alzheimer's. I've used baby monitors at night from her room to mine in case she calls out to me or becomes frightened, which occurs a lot. I have been bewildered over her talking and having conversations in her sleep state, and she puts lucid sentences together and even chuckles with a pausing as if she's speaking to someone. During her wake time, she struggles to make words and sentences that make oriented endings. Why is she able to sound so oriented, and even her tone of voice as it used to be when she's asleep? I find this fascinating, to say the very least, and would love some input on this wondrous thing that happens nightly. I cry sometimes of joy to hear my mom speak so lucid and actually laughing out loud.
Mm. That is so awesome, Sherry. And I got to tell you, that really makes me happy for you because not many people get that type of blessing to see that glimmer from the past. And although scientifically, I'm not sure I have the answer for you, I have tried to figure that one out for you with some research and haven't found the answer. My best guess is the sleep pattern that she's in. She's in a deep sleep, and she's able to go back into the recesses of her childhood, or deep into the brain tissue to be back to her old self again, where she has the cognitive ability to speak clearly, and to laugh and to have that same tone of voice that she had probably when you were much younger. So I think this is wonderful for you. I hope that you are, I don't know if you can videotape it since it's at night, but maybe if there's a way you can record it. I think it would be wonderful for you to play back to her during the day to show her that what she's doing at night, if she's able to understand that. I don't know where she is exactly with the disease, but I thought that would be wonderful. And then, of course, you would have those recordings later on as well. So I think that's wonderful, and I'm so happy for you to be able to enjoy hearing your mom like that. It doesn't sound like you're able to get much sleep, but it sounds like it's probably worth it.
I just thought when I read this, Karen, what a wonderful gift, and then
Mm-hmm.
oft in a very bleak moment of life.
Yes, I agree.
So that is wonderful, and I do hope, Sherry, that you can find some sleep on some nights, and those nights that you're wide awake, at least you have something wonderful to witness.
Yes.
Okay, our next question comes from Liz. Excuse me. Liz says, my husband is only 83, but was diagnosed with dementia, and has been in a nursing home facility for about a year. For a while, he thought I was his mother, then I was his aunt, but for about the last 4 months, he knows I'm his wife and wants so much to live with me. He tells me I'm the only thing that he lives for. It breaks my heart when I have to drive off and leave him waving goodbye at the nursing home door. He can take care of his needs, such as dressing and bathroom. A year ago, July, because he wanted so badly to come home, I brought him home. Jack was instantly very angry because my daughter had moved in with me to help me out. My daughter hates my husband because he has been very difficult to live with all of the 21 years we've been married, and she feels he has treated me with disrespect. She cannot understand that I forgave him and still love him. Jack stayed home with me for about a month, but things were so difficult, I finally took him back to the nursing home where he gets superb care and attention. His doctor and the social worker, plus the psychologist who takes care of my husband, now feel he is where he belongs and that I should not bring him home. And I know that I cannot handle his upsets and spells of anger anymore. I myself am 82 and in good health, except for some osteoarthritis, which is rather strong, which puts me in some on rather strong pain medication and causes me a lot of pain just to get around. So here's my question. How do I learn to leave my husband at the nursing home and not be brokenhearted about it every time I leave? When I'm there, he seems so normal, except for his memory, that I feel guilty for having him there. Maybe I'm the only one that needs help.
Well, first of all, Liz, I am so sorry that you are having to deal with this. Second of all, thank you so much for this question, because this is a problem not just for you, but for so many other caregivers. It is heartbreaking for them to leave their loved one in a home, because most patients do not want to stay there. They want to stay at home, and they let it be known. And so this is a very, very difficult situation. But one thing I want to really point out to you that you wrote in your letter was that his physicians and the people there, the social worker, all agree that he is where he needs to be. And I think you need to remember that, and that you have to remember that you have to take care of yourself. He is not going to get better, unfortunately, and I'm very sorry for that. But as he does progress, and he needs help with more and more things, and he has the probability and possibility of falling, those are things that could ultimately cause yourself many, many more problems, especially having the osteoarthritis. So I commend you for sticking to your guns and keeping him there, even though it is a very difficult time each time you go. But I want you to remember that you have to take care of yourself. It sounds like you and your daughter are very close, and I want you to think about what she would do if something happened to you because you were taking care of him, and the guilt that she would feel for not being able to help you more. So you have to really try to put into perspective what's important right now. And it sounds like he's very safe there. They're taking good care of him, according to you. He's getting all of his needs met, and it's a good home, and they're looking out for him, which is very, very good. Sometimes that's very difficult to find as well. So you ask how you can learn to leave your husband in the nursing home and not be brokenhearted. I'm not sure you can. You obviously love him very much, and you want to be there for him and make him happy. I think psychologically it's always going to be very difficult for you, but I think the one important thing is to remind yourself that this is what's best for him, and it's what's best for you. And I think you're going to have to do that every single time you go. It may get a little bit easier eventually, especially as he does progress. But I think that you have to just remind yourself that this is the best thing for him and for you and for your family, for your daughter. You have to think about her as well.
Wow, yeah. Liz, I'm so sorry you're going through this, and I remember the same heartbreak every time I would leave the facility my grandmother was in after I promised her years and years and years I would never let her go to a facility, and ultimately that ended up being what was best for our family. But it was, it was heartbreaking for me to leave and know that she was somewhere she didn't want to be. And it never entirely went away. But one of the things that really helped me was right before I would leave, and I typically had my two kids in tow with me. I would have her tell me what she was excited for coming up, whether it was that night or the next day. And sometimes she couldn't think of anything, and I'd have to prompt her and remind her that, what was on the menu, that, her favorite dinner was on the menu, or that there was an activity. And so that helped me to picture her when I left, not sitting alone, but being engaged and active. And it makes me glad to hear that he has professionals who seems like really care for him and are confident that you've made the right decision. And sometimes you just need to give yourself a break and know that it's okay to cry and be upset, but know that you've made the right decision. You promised to love and care for him, and that's exactly what you're doing.
So true, Kat.
I want to remind all of you who are listening today, who are online, that you can submit your questions for Karen in the questions section of your screen, and we will get to those. You can also email your question to livechat@homeinstead.com. And you can email those questions anytime. Okay, Karen, let's take a look here at our next question. And this one comes from Lana. And her question is, how can I protect my aging parents when one has Alzheimer's and the other is non-compliant? for example, with their medications, driving instructions, um, having medical power of attorney form signed? What are her options for helping her parents?
Wow, Lana, you have got your work cut out for you so much. Okay, first of all, I'm not sure where you live, but please contact your local chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. And they have some classes that usually can help um, with explaining to patients and their caregivers how important certain things are, like medical power of attorneys and things like that. So if you can at all, try to get in touch with them and try to get your parents, or at least the caregiver, to one of their support groups. Now, if they will not go, I would still get the information from them. I know our chapter here, when I first contacted them after we found out about Jim, gave me this thick booklet, and it had all kinds of things in it: elder care attorneys, support groups, social workers, homes, home care providers, just all kinds of, it was just a wealth of information. Again, if you can get that information, you might be able to get in touch with a social worker. If not, your local hospital would have a name of a really good social worker that might be able to help you with this, especially with things such as the driving and the medications. I know our local agency on aging that we have here does some tests for senior citizens, not just people with dementia, but just people that are getting older, to have them do some driving tests to make sure they can still drive safely. And so we actually had Jim do that as well. So there's certain routes you can take to try to get some help, because it sounds like you haven't been able to do this alone, and I'm sorry for that, but hopefully you can get some outside help. One other thing is, and I don't know if you've tried this, but to speak to your parents from your heart, from your perspective of how difficult this is becoming on you, and how much help you need from them so that you can help them later. You know, that's one of the conversations I had with my own parents. They are both relatively healthy, but when we started going through this with Jim, I sat him down and I said, I really need you guys to do this, this, and this. I needed them to update their wills. I needed them to get things in order, and they did. But I had to really lay it down for them, and this is what I need as your daughter, and this is going to hurt me in the long run if you don't do it. And sometimes you can sort of pull at the heartstrings to try to get them to do something that they normally wouldn't do. I mean, obviously, you can't force them to do anything they don't want to do, but sometimes finding just the right answer for them with what's bothering them, why they don't want to. A lot of times it's just denial, that if they go and do this, if they take this medication, or they go and meet with the attorney, it's admitting that this problem really does exist. And sometimes that's really difficult for people to do, especially when they're older. So you have your work cut out for you, and I hope that this answer does help you quite a bit.
Yeah, one of the things that I have learned just in my own experience is once somebody has raised us, it doesn't matter how smart we are, if we're a rocket science, if we ourselves are doctors, our opinion on things somehow just isn't as important as another expert's. So whether it's finances or, you know, health. So if you can find that doctor, instead of, Lana, you being the bad guy, have that doctor be the one to say this is important, or you know, have somebody else have to be the bad guy, and then you can be empathetic with them, and help them come up with a plan to transition into whatever that is, not driving, managing that medication, things like that. The other thing I would point out is earlier we had discussed the 40-70 rule. Part of that is an aging plan. And one of the tactics that we have found to work really well is to bring that over to mom and dads and let them know, hey, I am filling this out for myself and I need some advice. All too often, and you hear people use the term parenting our parents, and we start looking at the person we're caring for as a child and feeling like we have to treat them as a child and making sure, following up, have you taken your medication? Why are you doing this? You're not following the rules. But if you can give them a little bit of that status back as the parent and helping you walk through some of these very things they need to do, that can go a long way in helping as well. Okay, Karen, we are about halfway through our chat, and before we take on some more questions here, we are going to go ahead and ask those of you who are joining us online to take a poll. And it's real quick, you'll see it on your screen, and you can use the poll function that you see there. What is your role in the senior care community? You can select one of the following. I am an unpaid family caregiver. I am a professional caregiver, non-medical. I am a professional caregiver in the medical side. I manage or coordinate care for seniors, or I'm not in the care continuum. So if you'll go ahead and just take a moment to let us know what your role is. This really helps us as we develop programs and resources to make sure that we are meeting your needs and we are getting you the information and resources that you need. Karen, while we've got a minute here, I would love for you to talk to us a little bit about the Garner Foundation, how that came about, and what your hopes are for the foundation.
Oh, thank you, Kat. Well, of course, it came about because we are in the midst of dealing with younger onset Alzheimer's, and we've been dealing with this for about 6 years now. And throughout the time, I have searched online and searched through other organizations to try to find very specific help for our family. And very often, it just wasn't available. And knowing there's over 5 million people just in America dealing with Alzheimer's, it dawned on me, why aren't these things available? If I need them, then I know out of over 5 million people, somebody else needs them. And as I got very involved with the Alzheimer's Association, speaking at events for them and advocating for them up in Washington, D.C., to lobby our Congress people to fund more research, I met more and more people that were dealing with the same problems. And I sort of got my feet wet as far as speaking in front of groups and decided I can do this. I can make a difference. And so I got some friends together who were very knowledgeable in this area, and they said, yes, Karen, this is what you need to do. So we sort of started brainstorming, and it started from there. So the three-prong approach that the Garner Foundation has basically is to support caregivers. We focus on the caregiver. And the first one is elder care attorney help, as I spoke about earlier, setting up a network across the country to help people with elder care attorney help once somebody is diagnosed. The second prong is to help with respite care, because that is obviously desperately needed, and I know everybody out there that is a caregiver understands that without further ado. And then the third one is making memory trips, because I know for us, having young children, one of the things Jim and I really wanted to do before he progressed too far was to take a nice, lasting trip together as a family, a place that he had always wanted to go, and we wanted to have some great pictures and a great time together. Well, it ended up, we went, but it took us over 2 years to save for it. And in the meantime, he progressed, and it ended up my parents had to go with us on the trip to help me with him and the children. So at the Garner Foundation, we would like to provide those memories much earlier so that the family can enjoy that time together.
That is really great, and for those who are listening, if you know, perhaps they have some expertise in elder care or respite care, um, uh, elder care law, or even in a way that they could help with the Make a Memory trip, if they want to get involved in the Garner Foundation, how do they go about doing that?
They can contact us through our website, and it is garnerfoundation.org. So that's GARNER, and then foundation.org. And there's a place on there to contact us. And if they can't contact us for some reason through that, they can always go to my blog, missinggem.com, and there's a contact screen on there as well. And I would be so happy and very appreciative. So thank you.
Fantastic. Well, we're very excited to you know, watch the Garner Foundation grow and all of the good that it's going to do. So we really applaud you in all of your efforts to helping families just like yours.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, let's go ahead. Thank you all for taking time to answer our poll question. And if you're just joining us, my name is Kat Kaler with Homestead Senior Care, and I am really thankful to have my friend and colleague Karen Garner joining us for this month's live chat. So we are answering your questions. Go ahead and plug them into the questions section there on your screen. If you're not logged on online, but you want to email us a question, you can do that. In fact, you can email us your questions anytime at livechat@homeinstead.com. And don't worry if you've missed any of our chat today. We are going to email out a link of the recorded presentation. So you can go ahead and review that and get all the great tips. Also, if you have a tip that relates to any of our questions, go ahead and plug that into the question function as well. Just like Karen, we know that all of you who are working with Alzheimer's and loving someone with Alzheimer's every day, you have great tips and experience that can help all of us. So please share your tips in the question function as well. Karen, I'm going to go on to Glenda's question. And Glenda emailed us her question. And here it goes. She says, I need help with the primary caregiver of my mother-in-law, which happens to be her husband. I feel she is in stage 7 of this awful disease. We are not sure if my father-in-law is in denial of the disease or just going to do things, quote unquote, his way. He adds or changes her meds without calling the doctor, leaves her alone, leaves medications out. The list goes on and on. Several times she has taken her meds twice. He has walked in and just caught burning cornbread in the oven before a possible fire. He argues and raises his voice with her. I have provided educational material for him to read. He either hasn't read any of it or just going to care for her how he sees fit. He is 84 and is hard-headed. I do think in his mind he is taking very good care of her. I know he loves her, and any help you can give in guiding him through this would greatly be appreciated.
You know, Glenda, I feel very strongly about a couple of things that you said. And first of all, my heart goes out to you just like it did to Lana earlier, because to me they're very similar situations where you have an older person that you care so deeply about, and like you said, they're just hard-headed. They're set in their ways. They don't want to admit what's going on, or they just don't know how to do that. And that's the thing that I want to keep in mind during this conversation to answer this question is, you know, we don't really go to school to become a caregiver. For me personally, I'm not really a very good caregiver to Jim in the sense that I half the time don't really know what I'm doing. I'm doing it by the seat of my pants, And it's not something that I've ever had to do other than with my own children. And with them, you know, you read books and you have help and you sort of figure it out as you go along once you bring the baby home from the hospital. Um, in the situation where a loved one has some form of dementia, all of a sudden you have a situation where they are not themselves. One day they might be themselves the next day, and it becomes very difficult to know who they are going to be, how they're going to be, and what you should do for them. Your father-in-law is probably in a little bit of denial, and he's probably at a loss for what to do. So I know you left him some pamphlets and flyers and things, but I also recommend having some kind of expert to talk to him. Maybe, like I said earlier, a social worker, a doctor, maybe somebody else that he can relate to, like Kat had said earlier, an expert. Probably somebody that he trusts, maybe a friend who's had to go through this already, or a neighbor, an ex-coworker, somebody that he would have a little bit easier time relating to. Because some of the things you've mentioned, catching the cornbread on fire, taking her meds twice, or not taking her meds at all, that is very, very dangerous for her and for him. You cannot have somebody that's going to catch the house on fire being left alone. And you said she's in about stage 7. That's pretty far along in the disease. And unfortunately, she isn't going to go back to stage 6, and things are only going to get worse from here. If it gets to the point where you feel it is really a danger to her, which I feel like, based on what you said, Glenda, you're pretty close to that, you might have to get some help at the home. Either have a nurse or a caregiver come in, or you might actually have to call social services and have them come and explain that if he doesn't get help with her, or, you know, stop leaving her alone by herself, then they'll have to take some action. And I really don't like to say that. My heart breaks saying it, because there's a whole lot of other stuff that goes along with that, and you always want that to be your very last resort. But at the same time, you know, what would you do if the house did catch on fire and they both got killed, or, you know, had something happen to them, or she had some type of overdose? You know, you have to really try to think ahead in these situations, and it's very, very difficult. And he's hurting. This is somebody he loves. He feels responsible for her. She is under his care. So you need to make sure, when you do talk to him or you bring somebody else into the picture, that you let him know you understand he is doing the best he can, and that you understand and realize how much he loves her and he only wants the best for her, and how difficult this must be for him.
Yeah, Karen, great advice. This is such a tough situation. You know, you're right. Your heart does just break. You know, perhaps, Glenda, your husband, if you haven't already, having a heart-to-heart with Dad. You know, and just talking about, you know, Dad, I know how much you love Mom. Everybody knows how much you love Mom, and you've done such a great job of taking care of her. And, you know, Glenda, it might be you know, Karen mentioned bringing in some help. You know, perhaps you let your father-in-law know that, you know, Dad, you've done such a great job of taking care of Mom, but we want you to be able to just be her husband. And so we're going to get you some help so that you don't have to worry about all of these things. And that way you can just be her husband. You don't have to be her caregiver. And I really hope, right along with you, Karen, that it doesn't have to go any further, and that we don't get into a dangerous situation. Glenda, you know, absolutely reach out to your local Alzheimer's Association and get their take and see what resources they may have. So, and best of luck.
Yes, Best of luck, Linda. Please let us know how it goes.
Yeah. Okay, Karen, our next email comes from Anna, and here's what Anna has to say. She says, hello, my mom is 93 years old, and she is getting very nasty with me and her caregiver. She is telling me that she should have never adopted me and that God got even with me by not letting my marriage work out and that God took my one son away from me. How do you handle the cruelty?
Oh my gosh, Anna,
Ugh.
my heart absolutely breaks for you. These are some tough questions today, Kat. I tell you, there is never a good question when it comes to dementias, it seems like, really.
I know.
And, Anna, first of all, the one thing that is the easy answer is to say to you on the surface, remember that it's the Alzheimer's talking, it's not her talking. But after you hear it so many times and it's coming from your mom, the one person who knows you so well and who you've always looked to for love and guidance, it can just cut to the core and hurt like nothing else. I mean, that is like nobody's business right there. So it sounds to me like she's got some actual typical behavior for some Alzheimer's patients, and unfortunately, it can be very painful to feel the wrath of that. So one of the things you can do is get her to her neurologist or to her primary care physician, and there are some medications that can help a little bit with the anger that Alzheimer's patients can have and with having these types of episodes. It's not a guarantee. It doesn't work the same. These medications don't work the same with everybody. I know sometimes they'll have hallucinations and things like that. They have medication that can help with that as well. Unfortunately, there may not be anything you can do. The one thing that you can do is to try to get yourself some help, either bringing somebody into the home or possibly putting into her home. I don't know where she's living at. You said that she has a caregiver, and she's being very nasty with the caregiver that she currently has. So I would see if there's somebody else you can bring in. A lot of times what happens, and I think the Confidence to Care book that Molly Carpenter wrote through Home Instead Senior Care touches on this a little bit, is to try to understand where she's coming from. If there is something that sets her off with this behavior. Is it when she's tired or when she's hungry or when she's lucid enough to realize what is happening to her with the disease? And she's angry at her situation. Maybe she's angry she has a caregiver. And so she does what so many of us do that even don't have Alzheimer's, and when we're frustrated or we're angry, we take it out on the people closest to us and who we actually love and care about the most. And so unfortunately, though, that doesn't make it any easier, Anna. I'm sorry, none of this is going to make it easier, but hopefully maybe you can see a pattern. Are there specific days that she seems to do it or times of days? And maybe you can get somebody else in to help, or maybe give her some of the medication or try to change that pattern up just enough to cause her to get out of that pattern and stop saying those things that are so hurtful. I'm not sure that will help, but I would like for you to give it a try.
Yeah, this is so sad. And Karen, you mentioned Confidence to Care, the book by Molly Carpenter. And Anna, there is a chapter in the book on hostility. And so there are some tips in there, and you're right, Karen. She talks about really kind of taking stock in what is happening. Is there a need that's not being met, whether it's emotional, social? Are they bored? Are they maybe too much activity? Are they in pain? Is there a physical need? or perhaps environmental. And so there's Anna, if you want to get a copy of the book, you can go to confidencetocare.com and check that out. You know, my grandmother, when she got up there, used to say really horrible, nasty things. And, you know, it would, at first I would pretend like it didn't bother me, but then it really bothered me. You know, there's that whole nursery school rhyme, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. It's a bunch of hooey, especially when it's, you know, from somebody that you love so much. And eventually, Karen, what I started doing was, you know, I remember, you know, I wear my hair in a little pixie haircut, and my grandmother just thought that was the ugliest haircut ever. How could my husband actually like that? And I remember telling her, well, he doesn't have to wear it, and hopefully he doesn't ask his barber for one. But Grandma, your hair is looking lovely. And so, you know, it's really hard to get through, and it made me feel blessed for the moments that she was kind and really engaged. So, Anna, hopefully you can find some ways, find the trigger that is causing this, but ultimately know that's not what's in your mom's heart. Sadly, it's just what's in this awful, terrible disease.
Yes.
Okay, before we get to one more question, I want to thank everybody who has joined us and remind you that we will send you an email with a link to this recorded webinar. And you can keep in touch. If you have questions at any time, you can send them to livechat@homeinstead.com. Or you can also join us on Facebook and ask questions there. In fact, Karen, Facebook is where our next question came from.
All right.
And I love Facebook. If you haven't joined us on Remember for Alzheimer's, our community has grown to now over 250,000, and it is a great support group. We know that sometimes it's hard to get away, so if you're looking for folks who are in similar situations, it's a great place to go, and we'll be sharing that resource with you here shortly. Karen, this question comes from Allie, and here's what she has to say. She says, I've been caring for my 95-year-old grandmother who has had dementia for a couple of years now. The last couple of months, I feel more annoyed about this than joy like before. I need help with suggestions on how to fix two things that drive me batty. Number one, my grandmother will not wear a Depends to bed, and if I can convince her to do so, she takes it off sometime in the middle of the night. So every stinking day, I have to wash and change her bedding because she has soiled it. This drives me bonkers. Number two, my grandmother also will not take the time to find a Kleenex to put her mucus that she coughs up from having emphysema. She just spits it on the carpet or rubs it into the furniture or leaves it on the counter or tabletop. I make a point to put Kleenex in her pocket every day, as well as have boxes of Kleenex next to the spots in the house she sits. It's so frustrating. Help me, please.
Oh my gosh, Allie, not only is that frustrating, that is just gross. Let's be honest here. Let's be honest. Okay, my grandmother this week just turned 94. So I'm right there with you. I have a grandmother about the same age. She was a Southern belle, Southern lady. And as she has gotten older, of course, some of her habits have changed. And I have to tell you, it's a rude awakening when all of a sudden you see somebody who you witnessed growing up being one person and now you see them being a completely different person. So that in itself can be a little bit hard. And Allie, I just want to commend you for taking care of your grandmother and being there for her. I'm sure you have a lot of other stuff going on in your life, and it sounds like you're doing a great job and that you love her very much and you're trying to do your best. So I just want to say kudos to you for doing that. Thank you very much for being such a great granddaughter. So your first question, talking about the depends. Okay, there's a couple of ways you can try to do this. Um, First of all, I want you to go online and do some research on different products that they have for bedtime. There are some waterproof, not even sheets, they're like these mats that can sort of go in the bed to help the keep the urine there so that it doesn't get on to the sheets and the covers. Even when sometimes even with depends on they can leak and so forth. So there are several products out there that can help make it less of a cleanup each day. Now, when you say that even when you get them on her, she's taking them off during the night, it's very difficult to overcome that. There are some other products, again, there's catalogs that are full of products for when you have an elderly person at home and you need help with their eating and with their bathing and with their bathroom needs. So one of the things I would encourage you to do is try to find some of the products that really make it seem like they're more like panties versus the depends. She's obviously very embarrassed. I'm guessing that's what the problem is. Maybe they're uncomfortable. Maybe they're sticking to her, or maybe she's sweating in them, or maybe once they get wet, they're very uncomfortable, just like when you had a baby, or if they get wet, they cry, and it's time to come change them. So if there's a way to find out what it is that she doesn't like about them, that might make it a little bit easier. That might come up with a solution. I'm guessing not, since she's taking them off, and then it sounds like going to the bathroom in the bed. I would look into some of these other products and try to figure out if maybe you can make them more like panties that she would keep them on. And the next thing is with trying to get her to stop putting the mucus around. I have a friend who's got a parent who just leaves gum everywhere. They chew their gum and they leave it on the furniture, they leave it on the wall, they leave gum everywhere. And, that's pretty gross too. And they haven't been able to get her to stop either. And so I've actually had a conversation similar to this about how to get a parent to stop leaving the gum around versus the mucus, and we really didn't come up with anything other than to try to remind them of the health hazard, and remind them of when you were younger, your grandma probably wouldn't have let you do that, and just let her know that that's not acceptable, although I don't think that's going to work very well, and just keep trying with the Kleenexes around cleaning after her. I really don't have a very good answer for you, Kat. Do you have an answer for on that one?
So on the mucus one, I know that generation is not always fond of Kleenex, but they are used to using handkerchiefs.
Ooh, good idea, Kat.
So you can go to the fabric store, sometimes thrift stores, find her some pretty handkerchiefs, and see if she's more apt to use that rather than a tissue like a Kleenex. On the nighttime situations, I think one of the things you hit on, Karen, about the way that they feel might be bothersome. Allie, try layering. Perhaps if, washing one pair of underwear versus all the sheets, if you can put her in a pair of underwear and then maybe put a protective brief over that, see if she'll go that way. Or one of the things that one of our previous listeners asked or mentioned was having a baby monitor so that you can hear her when she does get up at night. I think you're right, Karen. It might be an indication that she is already either soiled or urinated in that brief. And so, Allie, it might be easier for you to just get up and help her change then rather than clean up the mess the next morning. So, and on top of those two things, Allie, it's really important for you and really for anybody, there's a couple of resources. You need some respite care. Karen talked about the importance of respite care and getting that break. You can apply for the Homestead program that we've partnered with Hilarity for Charity, and we give out respite grants to those family caregivers who are caring for somebody with Alzheimer's, and you can apply for that. And Allie, I also want you, when these situations come up, if you have a smartphone, which most of us do these days, the Alzheimer's Companion app. It was really developed to be a companion to Molly Carpenter's Confidence to Care book, but it's got all kinds of great tips. You can ask questions. You can get answers to tips that people have left before right there on your smartphone. So I want to thank you all for your great questions and for joining us today. Before we leave, I do want to show you the resources that we've mentioned today, and we'll be sure to get an email out to you that includes not only the recorded version of this chat, but also a list of these different resources that you can access. So first is helpforalzheimersfamilies.com. That is a great resource website. You can follow Karen's journey there. She does some blogs for us. You can also ask Karen a question. She answers questions from readers and visitors like you. This is also helpforalzheimersfamilies.com, where you can apply for the Alzheimer's Relief Care Grant. There's all kinds of great resources and support there for you and your family. Confidencetocare.com is where you can learn more about the book by Molly Carpenter. It's a resource for family caregivers providing Alzheimer's disease or other dementias care at home. And then Facebook.com/RememberForAlzheimer's is where you can join us on Facebook. As I mentioned before, we've got a great community of caregivers, both family caregivers and professional caregivers, just like you. So it's a great place to stay up to date on the news, maybe get some inspiration, and really support one another, get some tips and great resources. And then I really encourage you to go visit the Garner Foundation website. It's at www.garnerfoundation.org and learn how you can get involved. And of course, join Karen and follow her journey over at Missing Jim. So you can find her at www.missingjim.com. Karen, thank you so much. You always bring such great insights into our chats, and I always enjoy our time together. So thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Kat, and thank you everyone who sent in your questions. It's my pleasure to try to help other caregivers out there, and it's my honor. So thank you so much. I've enjoyed it.
Absolutely. And before we go, I want you all to mark your calendars for next month. We'll be speaking with another great expert, David Troxel. He's the internationally known expert in Alzheimer's disease and memory care. He's also the co-author of the Best Friends Approach to Alzheimer's Care. He also has cared for several family members suffering from the disease. So mark your calendars for Tuesday, June 30th at 5 p.m. Eastern. You can register now at the helpforalzheimersfamilies.com website. And if you have questions, go ahead and send those to livechat@homeinstead.com, and we'll be talking about tips for traveling with a loved one who has dementia, and of course taking any of your questions. So until we see you next month on Tuesday the 30th, we will see you online, and have a great rest of your week. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.